think we need to go over the calendar. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and a couple of weeks ago I posted a video about funny little Pentagon words that you don't hear anyplace else, like gonculator and reclama. And then I bumped into one of you who said, you know what's another thing I've never heard except in the Pentagon? It's a calendar scrub. Well, a calendar scrub is a particular kind of staff meeting, but to really understand what's going on and how to do it well, I've got to explain a couple of things first. First is just a word and the ideas behind that word. And the word is principal, as in my principal has to sign this memo before the close of business. Now, like a lot of government words, there are local definitions of what principal exactly means, but here I'm using it in a very broad and generic sense. So if what I say doesn't match exactly what Navy policy has or the Air Force instruction, bear in mind we're talking about it so that we can learn about calendar scrubs. Anyways, U.S. Code, public law, DoD instructions, they are just chock-a-block full of statements that assign responsibilities and authorities to different offices. The Chief of the National Guard Bureau will, or the Secretary of the Air Force for Manpower and Reserve Affairs may. These authorities and responsibilities belong to the office, but each office is occupied by somebody who is responsible for carrying out those duties, and that person is the principal. The other thing about these principals is that they usually oversee a large staff with diverse directorates that are organized to help them accomplish the duties of the office. And the principal typically has a front office that consists of an executive assistant, an executive officer, maybe a chief of staff. They might have a deputy, and that deputy might have their EA, all depending on how broad their scope of responsibility is and how senior they are. All right, so that is a principal. The next thing to understand about calendar scrubs is that no principal, no matter how senior, has control over their own calendar. The Commandant of the Marine Corps can get jerked out of a meeting to go brief the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense can get called off to the White House. And a congressman can just pick up the phone and call the Secretary of the Navy, and all of this can happen with zero warning. The final piece of the calendar scrub puzzle has to do with Microsoft Outlook. And this isn't a dig at Microsoft Outlook. It's more of a practical acknowledgement of reality. By and large, the Department of Defense uses Microsoft Outlook to schedule their meetings. But Outlook is actually a collection of office management tools like email and calendars and tasks. It's adequate for scheduling meetings, but it's not optimized for the unique challenges of the Department of Defense. By contrast, consider how we manage taskers. We use customized software like CADMS or ETMS2 or TMT, and we do not use Microsoft Office's built-in task management tools. And so a calendar scrub really exists to deconflict overlapping meetings, to prioritize meeting attendance based on the principal's goals, and to do the information sharing tasks that Outlook really isn't designed to do. Now, a calendar scrub, a calendar sync, it can be done a couple of different ways with a couple of different participants. So today I'm just going to focus on some key points, and then you can just mix and match in your own office. First of all, a key reason for the calendar scrub is just to deconflict overlapping meetings. As days go by, your principal gets invited to more and more meetings. At the same time, your principal is setting up their own meetings to accomplish their own priorities. And then there's a continuous parade of colonels and GS-15s who are offering preps or trying to get guidance on work they're doing. Left unattended, the principal's calendar becomes an overgrown mess. Instead of being able to anticipate and prepare for their scheduled events, life turns into a never-ending series of hey yous and jumping through flaming hoops. So that's the why we have to do calendar scrubs, but who should be involved? Well, the thing to keep in mind is that you do a calendar scrub in order to prioritize your principal's attendance at meetings and to delegate the attendance at the meetings he's not going to be at. That means you need your principal's input and intent. If you have a new principal, you can expect that they're going to want to be involved in the calendar scrubs, but then as time goes by, they'll probably pass that task off to maybe a deputy or a chief of staff or a trusted executive assistant. And one thing to keep in mind is that your principal's priorities may shift. For example, they may be directed to cover a meeting for one of their seniors. Or there may be a topic that in the past they just delegated, but now they're starting to take an interest in. That's one of the reasons that these calendar scrubs can't simply be automated. There is no fixed set of rules for these prioritizations. The next issue that plays into calendar scrubs is simply, what the heck are these meetings for? And you might think that the topic of a meeting should be obvious, but there's a couple of legitimate reasons that, that might not be so. Number one, there is a large number of routine meetings that bring together a cast of offices. And the regularly scheduled aspect of these meetings, well, they have a couple of benefits. They make it possible to carve out time in multiple principals' calendars far into the future. They establish a set decision-making group that always comes together, and they create the conditions to address a variety of topics that come up over time. But, of course, these regularly scheduled meetings often have changing topics. One week they may be looking at the timeline for helicopter upgrades, and the next week they may be talking about delays to procurement of tanks. What that means is that your principal's prioritization of some regularly scheduled meeting, it might change based on the topic. So, an important question in a calendar scrub is, what topics are going to be discussed at this meeting? Lots of times, the calendar invite lacks that kind of specific information until the last minute, sometimes not even then. In those situations, the front office has to go looking for more info. The other reason that figuring out what a meeting is about can be important is that there can be some confusion about the intent of a meeting. Meeting names can be vague, they might change when you get new leadership, and there might be more than one name used for the same meeting. And the last thing you want to do is prep your principal on some set of material only to have him sitting in a meeting that's about a different topic. The final thing about calendar scrubs is they're kind of like doing the dishes. If you don't do them regularly, a mess will build up. And, maybe more frustrating, you can never do such a wonderful calendar scrub that you don't have to do it again. Your experience may vary, but in general, a calendar scrub is usually only good for about a week out, maybe two. And if you put too much effort into meetings that are more than a week or two out, you just end up wasting your time. Now, if you want to see some other front office topics that come in handy, like writing a ghost note, watch this video. And if you want to see your options for saving and sharing ghost notes, watch this video.